Joined now by the Shadow Attorney General, of course, Emily Thornberry. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about strikes to start with. Just chatting to the leader of ASLEF, he says there's nothing on the table that will stop their members going out on strike again.
I know. Dreadful, isn't it? I just don't think that this government takes it seriously. I think somehow or other they think that they can just wait it out, that somehow or other people will turn against them and then the workers will just go back to work. It's not going to work. That's not how it... I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand why they don't sit down and have some serious talks and why they haven't been doing it for a long time, you know, and why we've ended up with these strikes in the first place. You hear from the unions that they will negotiate with the employers, but they know that the people who are really pulling the strings behind the scenes are government ministers who seem to turn up at the last minute and say, oh, actually, we've got to deal with driverless trains. Or, you know, looks like you two might be getting on a bit too well. We're going to stick this, you know, this problem right in the middle of your negotiations. I think it's irresponsible. I sometimes think that they don't want the strikes to end, and I don't know why. Why are they doing this?
Well, I suppose the government would say, certainly as far as public sector pay is concerned, that is decided by the independent pay review process. Do you think it is independent?
Well, so you have an independent pay review process, and sometimes governments pay attention to it and sometimes governments don't. And one of the ways, sometimes you might get a government who might say, well, we had the independent pay review process, but since then we've had a spike in inflation, so perhaps we need to think again about it. But this government is not doing that. They're hiding behind the independent pay review process and expecting people to effectively have a pay cut. And when you have exhausted, tearful nurses expected to carry on and feeling like they're being taken advantage of and taken for granted, you begin to get an undermining of the National Health Service in a way which nobody wants.
How independent is the Labour Party, though? Because the government could point to the sort of money that you guys get from the unions. So obviously, you've been seeing what we've been doing with our Westminster accounts. Unite, 8.8 million, Unison, 4.6 million, GMB, 4.1 million, on it goes.
Well, I mean, it's no secret, you know, it's in our name. With the Labour Party, we were created by working people in order to be a voice for them, but we are independent of the trade unions in that they can't tell us what it is that, you know, no one's ever tried to tell me what to say. I mean, we don't get that from the trade union movement, but they know that it's in the interest of working people to have a Labour government. And indeed, it's in the interest of everyone, in my view, to have a Labour government. So they will support us in the work that we do, and we will obviously consult them. And the common sense that many trade unions have because of their connection with their membership is something which, why should anybody be embarrassed about? I mean, I think it's important to hear what they have to say.
Well, given that you get 20 million quid or thereabouts from the unions, even when you get back into power, does that mean that the unions will have much more power?
I think that what will happen is that they will get the sort of government that working people need. I think that we will be a party that won't allow strikes to happen in that way. We will sit down and talk to the unions at an earlier stage. We won't have these stupid standoffs. I mean, when we were in power, during the whole time we were in power, we didn't have strikes in the National Health Service. We had a National Health Service that was one to be proud of, and, you know, very few people took out private medical insurance because they knew they were going to be able to get the treatment that they needed within a timely way within the NHS, and that's the sort of NHS that everybody wants.
Why is it that the SNP is taking the lead on reforming second jobs and other income for politicians and not the Labour Party?
I don't think they are necessarily. I mean, I think that we've been saying for some time that we would not want MPs to have second jobs, and if we are given the opportunity to serve the public in a couple of years' time, we will reform the system. Keir has said for a long time that he doesn't think MPs should have a second jobs. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. You know, if what you're doing is writing a book or hosting a radio programme, you know, encouraging political debate, bringing more people into politics, then obviously that's a different thing. But, you know, being an advisor to a company and being paid a large amount of money for that is not really on. So, you know, being an MP ought to be a full-time job. We do want to restore faith in politics, and we have a number of ideas that, you know, we want to set up an independent ethics commission, for example. We think that ministers should be declaring their interests in the way that MPs do, and it shouldn't just be left to the ministerial code, which is policed by the Prime Minister. We don't think that's enough. We think that they should be on a par with all other members of Parliament.
David Lammy, then. Where are we with Mr Lammy? He takes money for advising companies like JP Morgan.
Well, I mean, as I say, Keir has made it clear what it is that he thinks that people should do, and if we get into power, we will change the rules. We will make it clear that that an MP should have their job should be a member of Parliament. It should be a full-time job, and the work that David does with writing books and being in the media
didn't refer to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just saying that that's an exception. But Keir has made it pretty clear what his views are. He is, consulting on it. We do want to make sure that our policy is a good one, but it will be. We're not having any messing around. We will be firm about this.
So just to be clear, when and if Labour come to power in 2 years' time, there will be no more opportunities for MPs to get consultancy fees?
That is not what we want to do, no.
So people like David Lammy will not be allowed to take money?
I don't know about
like
the circumstance. I don't know about what's going on with David and JP Morgan. It's news to me. But I know what Keir is saying, and Keir is saying exactly that. This consultancy, this MPs essentially giving advice because they're an MP to an independent company is not something which is right. And we have enough to do looking after our constituents. And if we are fortunate enough to be in the Cabinet, that will certainly be more than a full-time job.
Just talk to me about Sir Keir's trip to Northern Ireland. What does he hope to achieve from that?
Keir has worked in Northern Ireland for a long time and has many friends there and many connections. What we've always tried to do is make a positive contribution to what's going on in Northern Ireland. We seem to be able to talk to many people with ease. Sometimes we think perhaps more than the government does. We think that you can learn a lot when it comes to how we're going to solve the issue of us having left the European Union and with Northern Ireland being on the border with Europe. We seem, there are many people in Northern Ireland who have real practical solutions as to how it is you import and export across that border. You need to learn from them. And we've put forward a number of solutions that have been urged on us. And if you're living there, and it's your preoccupation, people have been sitting and working out and being creative. Small businesses have got suggestions. And what we hear from them quite often is that the government doesn't listen. We will listen. We will put forward their suggestions. We will be advocates for them in order to be able to try to find a proper solution. Because in time for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, we want to have an agreement with the European Union that's going to work.
Always great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Nice to see you too, Kay.